Some grocery data today suggests UK food price inflation is starting to abate, yet there are warnings that the painful spike in food prices we've seen over the past year has been partially driven by global warming. Some have termed it climate inflation. It's an argument that global warming is already contributing to our cost of living pressures. What's the evidence for it? A big driver in the spike of global food prices last year was manifestly the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which curtailed exports of grain and fertilizer from the country, which is responsible for a large chunk of global supplies of both. But the summer 2022 heat wave also led to drought across the continent and damaged crop yields, and this also likely had an upward impact on food prices. Researchers at the European Central Bank recently analyzed the impact of the European heat wave on prices, carefully isolating its effect from the Ukraine invasion. This shows their estimate of the impact of the heat wave on European food inflation in 2022 around 0.7 percentage points. That's out of food inflation that hit 20, and they estimate that by 2035, in a high carbon emission scenario, the contribution of such a summer to inflation would be higher, and in 2060 without emissions reductions it would be higher still, possibly adding more than 2 percentage points to food inflation, and that has impacts on headline overall inflation. The researchers estimate that the heat waves added around 0.3 percentage points to headline European inflation last year. By 2035 that's higher if emissions don't come down, and by 2060 such a heat wave could add 1 percentage point to overall inflation. Now that might not sound like a lot, but bear in mind that central banks have a target of 2%, so this would be accounting for around half of that. The main takeaways that we're able to identify that historical increases in temperatures do in fact have caused upwards pressures on inflation across different economies of the world, and in particular when we start to evaluate those impacts looking forward into the future, what we find is that future global warming is going to cause persistent increases in prices, in particular food prices, but also general prices. This does have implications for the UK. Despite Brexit, we are very much part of the wider European food system. Just under half of the food consumed in the UK comes from abroad, and around a quarter, 28, you can see it there in pink, comes from mainland Europe. Recall that we felt the impact of this dependence during the winter when freak cold weather hit Spain and North Africa, contributing to the severe shortage of salad vegetables on UK supermarket shelves. It's sometimes implied that tackling climate change is divorced from everyday concerns, that global warming is a long-term problem while inflation and rising bills are a problem for the here and now, but science and economics increasingly suggest a connection.